What's up guys, welcome to the video. Before we dive into the meat of everything, I want to do something today that I think is a good exercise. I hope it's a good exercise for you guys, but even for me and just for my own sake, I feel like this is a good exercise. Now, this is going to make a lot of sense if you have watched that webinar replay of the 6 steps to an essential style that I've put up. If not, go watch this here. It's a long one. You want to take some time. It's about 45 minutes long, but it's awesome. I mean, honestly, like, almost everything that I've ever learned or been able to kind of theorize, I can speak English, I promise, theorize or come up with about style is in this webinar, and each one of those 6 steps is going to be its own chapter in the upcoming book, and I'm going to flesh out a lot of those concepts, so it's definitely worth checking out. But then as far as that applies today, I'm going to walk you through how what I'm wearing today, where I'm going, who I'm going to be with, all those things are factored into why I actually decided what I'm wearing. So before we do that, let's actually show you what I've got on. And before I even show you that, let me tell you, it's not anything crazy, but there's a reason for that. So let's take a look. By the way, ignore the bed there because it's laundry day and that's just how it's going. So, okay, so simple, like forest green J. Crew t-shirt, some light wash jeans from Mott & Bow, my Adidas Stan Smiths. I've got a really simple watch from Daniel Wellington, and then I've got my signet ring that I always have on, and that's basically it. So very, very simple outfit, super casual, but I'll explain to you why I'm wearing what I'm wearing using all 6 of those steps. Okay, so let's start with the first one, and that's body. Now, as you notice, this stuff fits the way that it's supposed to. It's not hyper skinny, but it's not overly baggy. Like, notice that the bicep is, or the sleeve kind of fits right where it should on my bicep. It's slim, but it's not too skinny. It fits really well. But then even with my coloring, like this kind of green, this really warm earth tone green, this is really good with my skin tone, especially with the red and the beard. But it doesn't make me look like a leprechaun because it's the right kind of coloring there. Same thing with like the light wash, working with it being summer and all that kind of stuff. And so that's, first of all, just starting off with body. Now, second of all is archetype. Now, you guys who have been watching for a while, you know that my primary archetype is refined, and I've got a decent amount of rakish and then a chunk of rugged in there as well. Now, nothing about this is really that rugged, which is fine, but most of it falls within the refined category just because of its simplicity. And the only things that get it a little bit rakish are the fact that I've got the signet ring going on and the fact that my pants are cuffed up. I've got them in a rolled cuff a little bit. Now, once we go from the archetype, we go into the tribe. And for the most part, this is where things really kind of start to distinguish themselves and matter a little bit more. So what I'm doing today is I'm taking my kids, we're going to my nephew's birthday party, they're doing a barbecue. This is my wife's family, these are my in-laws, and they're people who don't necessarily get super excited about style stuff. And at first there was kind of this, I don't want to say friction, but there was a little bit of like, well, what's this like fashionista doing, marrying our daughter slash sister, and hey wife, sneaking in there. And so for them, if I were to be overly dressed up, which honestly means like if I were to throw on some linen trousers and a button-up shirt, kind of like this outfit, then while to me that's casual, and within some other tribes that's adequately casual and that works well, for this tribe that's just a little bit too dressed up. And
these peasants.
My family are not peasants. My in-laws are not peasants. They just don't care about style like I do, which is great. It keeps me not hyper-focused on it all the time. Anyway, if I am too dressed up, it's a distraction, and it ends up becoming the source of conversations when it's not about me being there. It's about my nephew's birthday and about being able to just get along with them and have good conversations about other things that actually matter beyond just my clothing. At the same time, I still want to have my own personal taste in there, and so I'm not afraid to dress differently. And that's again where some of those rakish elements come through. I've always got that signet ring on. Nobody else there is going to be wearing white sneakers or wearing stuff that fits as slimly as what I'm wearing, and that's because I like that. That's part of my personal taste, is being a guy who's into menswear. So I'm certainly not going to just conform and wear exactly what they're wearing. There's still a unique component of who I am. Now, the location is obviously a big one, because even if I were going out with different people, the fact that we're going to a barbecue means that I still probably would not be putting on linen trousers and a button-up shirt, because it's not necessarily going to be the best thing when it comes to a barbecue, and the fact that we may throw a football around or do a few other things, and so I have to factor that in irrespective of the tribe or anything else. And then the last thing is the effort, not only in the ease of getting ready, which is super simple with jeans and a t-shirt, but the effort throughout the day. Like, I don't have to worry about, are my collar stays where they should be, or is my pocket square coming out, or is my tie moving around wrong, or even are my pants not sitting where they properly should. This is just a super effortless outfit, both in the execution and in the continuation of that execution. So just think about those 6 things, and honestly, you don't have to you'll get to the point where you don't have to think about them cognizantly, because for me it's just kind of on automatic because I've been doing this for so long. But like we talked about in a previous video, the only way to get to that effortless mastery is through effortful mastery at first. And so you just got to keep practicing, you got to keep thinking about things this way, and then we're going to get there. So start doing that. Okay, so obviously you guys, which, by the way, I didn't change my clothes. It's another day from that first part of the video you just watched. Anyway, obviously you guys, you're smart guys. I love the conversations that we have. I'm excited after we do this part to continue the conversation that we had starting on the next video. But you don't get any smarter if you don't learn from other people, and one of the best ways to do that is by reading stuff. And so I've got, I believe, 2 books that are here. We'll see if that's what's in here, but I'm pretty sure that's what that is, that I'm excited to check out. So the first one is called The Devil's Cloth, and I think that this is going to be very interesting. I actually stumbled upon a quote from this as I was doing some homework for The Appearance of Power, the book that I'm working on. And it's basically all about the history of stripes and why it was used to mark prisoners, how it used to be a symbol for the devil, and kind of the history and the philosophy and the application of stripes on clothing and on other things. And so obviously right up my alley, right? So I'm excited to check this guy out. And then the other one, this is a behemoth, and this is from a buddy of mine. His name is Rollo Tomasi. He and I have actually spoken at a conference together. This is his 3rd book that he's written out, and this is one that is not for the faint-hearted, because there's a lot of stuff in here that is very politically incorrect. Rollo's red pill, and so if you aren't open to exploring some different ideas about the relationship between men and women and those kinds of things, this may not be for you. But I'm really excited to dive into this, especially because the title of it, Positive Masculinity, is one of those things that we need more of. Honestly, I mean, I get sick of hearing about anti-feminism this or alt-right that or blah blah. I just, positive masculinity. There are good things about being a man. There are good things about being a woman. And anyway, I'm excited to dive into that one. So if you guys want to check either one of those out, yeah, I guess I'll put a link for them down below, and you can do that. So this should be good. I'm excited. All right. Let's talk about whether or not a man should have an emotional response to the clothing that another man is wearing. And I gotta say, as always, I love the responses that you guys have had to that question. And I'm still not fully formed in my opinion yet, which I think is wonderful. I don't think that it's possible for us to, me ask a question and spend a week thinking about it, reading your response, and all of a sudden it's like, boom, that's it. We've got the answer. We can move on to the next thing. I certainly don't feel that way about this one. Let me tell you kind of where I am on my thought process with it. I think that positive and negative emotional responses are more justified in 2 different categories. One is the closer you are to the man who's dressing a certain way, the more that you would bring him in into your concentric circles of important tribes. So the people that you go to work with versus your family versus those kinds of things. So I have already, and I will have emotional responses to the things that my son wears. Like when he looks really handsome and he wears stuff well, I have an emotional response to that. I'm proud of that. I'm happy with that. I'm pleased with that. At the same time, we don't let him paint his fingernails. His cousins can do that. Some of his friends can do that. And there are a lot of people who are just well, he's 3 years old. He doesn't know. And that's fine, but that's a rule that we've established because there are certain aesthetic things that men do and there are certain aesthetic things that men don't do. But if I were to come home and find out that he had painted his fingernails or a cousin or somebody else had done that for him, I would have a negative emotional response. Now, I wouldn't be pissed off at him, and I certainly wouldn't be letting that emotion control my interaction with my son, by no means, but I do not believe it's appropriate for a man, unless he has a very specific reason to within a particular tribal context and there's meaning behind it, to paint his fingernails. There's no reason for it. I think that that's a feminine thing. That's aesthetic beauty as opposed to aesthetic power. So at the same time, my nephews do it, and yeah, I don't agree with it, but I certainly don't lose any sleep over it. I certainly don't have an emotional response to it, because that's on their parents, and that's a decision that they can make. And I don't even necessarily think that that's a right or wrong objective. That's just kind of our standards. But I do think that when the people who matter to you violate your agreed upon standards for what is an aesthetic decision, an emotional response is justified, just like when they very much live up to those standards, a positive emotional response is justified. Now, I think the other situation is one that is a little bit harder to quantify, and I guess you can even tie it into like painting your fingernails or things like that. I think within culture in general, there are certain things that are even designed to do that. Like, I believe David Thiel, Dave, you know this, you make great comments. I think you were the one who said something along the lines of, there are particular things that some people wear that are designed to elicit an emotional response. Like, we should be responding emotionally to that. That's what the wearer wants. And I know I certainly went through that when I was in my punk rock phase, and I wanted to dye my hair black, or I wanted to wear safety pins and band patches and that kind of stuff on my backpack at school. Like, that was designed to elicit an emotional response, that was designed to set people on edge and to make them feel like I was the other and that they were the other compared to me, and blah, blah, blah. So I guess in the kind of the bigger global or cultural context, there's room for that. But I guess where the line I would draw it, and I'm curious to hear if this is where you guys will be too, where I would draw it is that it shouldn't be more than a passing emotional response. And that emotional response, if it's somebody who's outside your actual vicinity of influence, should be anything that you actually do anything about. Whether that's like jumping onto a forum and ripping somebody up and down because of what he's wearing, or going out and talking to somebody across the street because you're offended by his clothes, or whatever else it may be. I don't know. I mean, at the same time, if I'm out walking around and there's a dude and he's got nothing on but like a tube sock over his junk, then I will go talk to him because I don't want my kids exposed to that. And so I guess there are certain lines of decorum that you would want to defend as a society and as a culture, and that obviously gets harder as we become less and less homogenous and more diverse in kind of what's acceptable and what isn't. But I guess where you define your standards to be and where you define those others to be, I don't know. This is kind of a fun one. And so I guess I want to throw it out to you guys, is where would you draw that line for other people within the context of the bigger culture, but aren't necessarily within your vicinity of influence? If somebody were wearing something that you thought was not just appropriate, but maybe immodest or gory or something else that you were concerned about the emotional response it would elicit in other people over whom you have influence, would you talk to that person and say, you can't be wearing that in public, dude? Like, what are you doing? Do you think that there should be decency laws? Do you think that there are things that should actually be in place, codified rules of decorum when it comes to clothing and those kinds of things? Where do you draw the line? So I don't know. I guess all of a sudden this question becomes an even bigger question as opposed to having a definitive answer than where we were before, but that's the whole purpose of this. Now, speaking to that point, and that being the whole purpose of this, obviously I want you guys to continue to respond in the comments here on YouTube, but if you're watching this on Facebook, and especially within the Facebook group, then you will know that I've now decided that I want to get a little bit more active in Facebook, especially within a group, because I think that's a better medium for us to be able to have a really good quality discussion about things like this. And so if you're watching this on YouTube and you want to engage with me and the other guys in the group on the discussion, there's a link for you right here below. You can go join us in that group and then we can talk about this here. But like I said, where do you draw the line? Where would you draw the line, especially when it comes to how you would actually act on that emotional response? Do you think that there should be laws and codifications of what's decent or indecent, offensive or not offensive or anything else? I cannot wait to hear what you guys have to say about this. Ramble over, rant done. I will talk to you on the next one.